Today, we are going to be listing the top 10 Nintendo franchises in terms of sales numbers, and a lot of these will probably surprise you. Starting off with number 10. The very first surprising number here, Brain Age is the 10th best-selling Nintendo franchise of all time at 35 million units, the vast majority of which came on the DS back in 2005. Brain Age 1, Train Your Brain in Minutes a Day, sold 19 million units, and Brain Age 2, More Training in Minutes a Day, sold 14.8 million units. There was a game on DSiWare called Brain Age Express, which sold so poorly that we don't even know what those sales numbers even look like, and then Brain Age Concentration Training, which was on the 3DS and just sold over 300,000 copies. Fast forward 7 years of no games in the Brain Age series, and we got on the Nintendo Switch in 2019, Dr. Kawashima's Brain Training for Nintendo Switch, which sold just over 1 million copies. If I'm being honest with you, I really don't think this series has much of a future. It really captivated that Blue Ocean audience back on the DS, and I personally could not be more surprised that they didn't give the Wii an installment of this game. I'm pretty sure everybody on the DS had a Brain Age game at one point. All of the touch controls and the stylus really personalized the experience for handheld consoles, so it does make sense, I suppose, that they didn't put it on the Wii, but they absolutely could have used pointer controls to establish the exact same type of controls. And then they just didn't, and they kind of let it sit out to dry, and by the time they got around to making another one for the DSiWare and then for the 3DS, a whole 7 years later, then 7 more years for the Nintendo Switch, the fad had just kind of ended. There was no longer any sort of audience that was willing to give this game a chance or the franchise a chance. And I would be very surprised if we got any further installments in this series other than just the hearts of the developers wanting to make more. Perhaps this series is nostalgic for them, and perhaps it could resurge on a later date on a different console. But for the Switch 2, I would be very, very surprised if we saw another game, and moving forward, I would be shocked to see this series even make some sort of return. Because to be honest, if the Nintendo Switch couldn't save this series, I don't think anything could ever bring it back. But it has nothing to be ashamed of. The series really did capture lightning in a bottle on the DS. So many people grew up with Brain Age, and a lot of people would probably be sad to hear me say it's not coming back, but that's just kind of where we stand for now, unless something happens in the future. At number 9, we have the Kirby series, and it is sitting at 41 million units at the time of this recording. This is another one that kind of surprises me, but the more I think about it, it really does make sense. Kirby has been around for a very long time, and Nintendo just seems to keep putting out games. This number encapsulates every single Kirby game that has ever released, and there are a lot of them, and to be honest, I am a little embarrassed for the series that it only sits at 41 million units because there are a million games in this franchise. The very first game in the Kirby franchise, Kirby's Dream Land, came out on the Game Boy in 1992 and sold an impressive 5 million copies for the first game in a franchise. But in every single game from 1992 to 2018, for 26 consecutive years, every single Kirby game that released could not even hit 3 million copies, and the vast majority of these didn't even hit 2 million. Then we had Kirby Star Allies in 2018 that hit 4.3 million, and that game was absolutely not deserving of that number when it released. The game was far too easy, there was not a lot to do, you could finish it in just a couple of hours, to be honest, and it was really scrutinized at the time because of the DLC model that Nintendo had seemed to adopt it a lot in 2018. They drip-fed the content, and by the time it all released, the game felt a lot more whole, but it just wasn't there for a lot of those initial buyers. And then in 2022, we had Kirby and the Forgotten Land, the very first time this franchise had gone into 3D, and oh my goodness was this game phenomenal, and it sold over 7.5 million units. The future of Kirby looks brighter than ever, but for a long time there, I couldn't have been more surprised at why they kept releasing games for this franchise. I mean, 1 million, 1.9 million, 1.8 million, less than a million sometimes. This game series did not sell very well, yet Nintendo just kept plugging along because it was Masahiro Sakurai's baby, and they really needed to do everything they could to keep the man happy, but also I feel Kirby was just a mainstay pillar for Nintendo at large. You don't associate Nintendo without at at least thinking of Kirby somewhere along that list. Mario, Zelda are at the top, maybe Splatoon nowadays, maybe Animal Crossing, but you don't get very far down that list before the big pink puffball comes up on you. A lot of these games did not sell very well, but the sheer amount of them is what propelled the franchise up to number 9. And as I said before, the future looks brighter than ever, and I cannot wait to see what happens on the Nintendo Switch 2 with this franchise and where these studios take it from there. At number 8, we have another complete shocker for me. The Game & Watch series sits at number 8, having sold over 43 million units. Now, I had to do a bunch of research for this because I couldn't have been more confused as to why the series sold so well. But I'll tell you right now, a lot of these sales have nothing to do with the digital software themselves. In fact, all of the digital software only sold about 4 million copies altogether from 1995 to 2008 on the Game Boy to GBA to DS. No, a lot of this came from the physical versions of these Game & Watches. If I'm being totally honest, I am too young to understand a lot of this hype, but back in the day, apparently, there were a bunch of physical copies of these little Game & Watch things, and they were essentially like DS models, except you didn't have a bunch of games to choose from, it was just the one game that you could play on. And with that, there were a lot of different types of Game & Watches. There were silver ones, there were golden ones, there was a Mickey Mouse one, there was a widescreen one, there were all kinds of different ones of Game & Watch consoles. And I don't even know if console is the correct term here. If someone in the comments has a lot of experience with Game & Watches, please help me down below. If it's like some sort of handheld, do I call it a console? It has some sort of screen, I suppose, and it lights up a little bit, so I assume it's a game console. But regardless of my confusion, these games sold incredibly well. Kind of like the Kirby series, there are a ton of them, and that is why they sold as well as they did, but there is one outlier, and that is the Donkey Kong Game & Watch, which sold 8 million, which is a lot different than most of the other 1 to 2 million, and sometimes even less than that. There was a Mario Bros. One, and those only sold about 1.2 million, which is kind of surprising, but just the sheer amount of these consoles is what ended up selling them so well. And it also makes perfect sense as to why they got discontinued and why it will probably be dethroned by some other up-and-coming franchises such as Splatoon, Xenoblade. Those franchises are on consoles in which they can continue to repeat that success. This was just a one-and-done kind of thing, because once you get rid of that and you go towards the DS or to the 3DS or the Switch, where you can play a million different games instead of just the one kind, which is, as far as I understand, it's just the one kind of game, it makes perfect sense as to why this franchise is pretty much done and why it will fall down the ranks as history swallows it up. At number 7, we have a more familiar franchise, Super Smash Bros. Sold over 66 million units combined. Now, a lot of this comes from Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, 35 million units, but the rest of the series has also sold pretty well. 13 million units on Brawl, 7 million on the GameCube, and the rest of the franchise sold at least 5 million units. The Nintendo Switch not only saved a lot of franchises, but boosted the already existing ones into the stratosphere. Smash Bros. Is moving forward in a light not seen before. But there is some concern about the future of this franchise. How do you progress after Ultimate? What can you possibly do to top such a massive game? I'm confident that they will never pass it in terms of scale and scope, but graphically and mechanically, I think they can expand some features here. Moving forward, I wouldn't be surprised if they started to get a little bit more technical for some people who want to dive into that. I could see them totally remastering Mario's movesets, all of the classic characters from the N64 version. Really slow down that roster in terms of size, but make it intentional. Make every single character extremely unique. The DLC characters were so much fun because all of them had some sort of gimmick, some sort of new method of playing and interacting with the game that really made it incredibly fun to play. I think every character could have something like that moving forward, and it doesn't have to be as big as Ultimate, just that it has to be different than Ultimate in a much better way. And if you think of it with the Switch 2 and Switch 2 Edition games, you can play Smash Ultimate probably enhanced all you want on that console, and it's just right there. But for the next iteration of the franchise, it makes sense for them to want to scale it back a little bit, for then the consumer to have two options: the bigger and probably better in terms of scope and scale, or the more technical, mechanical, focused version of a Smash Bros. Experience, a game that is built ground up for the Nintendo Switch 2, and a game that will probably shatter sales even further. I also am concerned a little bit about who will continue to make these games. Smash Bros. Has always been fathered by Masahiro Sakurai, as we talked about a little bit earlier in my Kirby section of this video, and every single game, it feels, once he finishes it, he says he's done. He's retiring, he's gonna take a break or whatever, and sure, it has been about 7 years since the last Smash game, and Sakurai is already working on the next game. We don't know if it's a Smash game, but it's another game he said he was working on. At some point, they're going to have to pass that torch and keep this series going for someone who is just as passionate about it, but that is very hard to come by. There is no one like Sakurai. Nintendo will not let this franchise die. They will not let it fall into some sort of obscurity, and I cannot wait to see what the Switch 2 has in store in terms of Super Smash Bros. At number 6, we have Animal Crossing, which has sold over 70 million units, and you already know the vast majority of that came from Animal Crossing New Horizons, which sold 45 million games. The second best-selling game is New Leaf on the 3DS. It sold about 13 million units, and the other games in the franchise didn't even really hit 5 million, except for Wild World on the Wii, which sold 11. This series has been very up and down for the past decade, and on the GameCube, it only sold 2 million units. To equate that to modern standards of what a new IP could look like, ARMS sold over 3 million units back on the first month of the Switch, and that game has not gotten a sequel and probably never will. Animal Crossing somehow someway got greenlit for another game, and the franchise continued and touched the hearts of millions. This is one of the more passionate fan bases. Everyone loves Animal Crossing, and leading up to its reveal on the Nintendo Switch, it felt as though every single Animal Crossing fan was burning down the bridges, saying, hey, where is Animal Crossing? We want it so bad. I remember in 2017, after the June Direct, one of the best Directs of all time, people were saying, where's Animal Crossing? And I was like, are you kidding me? Can we slow down for a second? They just revealed like 15 new first-party games. But Animal Crossing nonetheless has an incredibly bright future. New Horizons isn't even considered to be the best game in the franchise for many people. New Leaf has taken that throne for so many and continues to hold over New Horizons. They can add so many in a future game, and they have so much more content to put into it. They have a ton to build off of. New Horizons was phenomenal, but it didn't come with a lot of the features that had been known for the series prior. They changed it up a lot with the crafting system, but they could perfect that even further. I expect these numbers to get even larger in the Switch 2 generation, and I can't wait to see what happens next because I hadn't gotten into this franchise until New Horizons opened my eyes and made me see the truth. COVID really inflated those numbers, and I do believe that the people being trapped at home and the masses wanting to have something to play bought a Switch Online, bought Mario Kart, and then also bought New Horizons. New Horizons got so many people through tough times, and I wonder if those sales will carry over to a new game. I won't be surprised at all to see a new Animal Crossing game become the second highest selling game in the series, which means it would have to at least hit 12 million units, but I don't know how much higher it will go. Animal Crossing has a lot to prove. Is it a new pillar or was it just a fad? Was it just lightning in a bottle because of COVID? Only time will tell. At number 5, we have Donkey Kong, and I couldn't have been more surprised to see this until I realized what was driving the majority of these sales. Donkey Kong franchise has sold over 82 million units, and that includes every single iteration of the Donkey Kong arcade game. My brain instantly went to the Donkey Kong Country series, but I had forgotten how big of a deal the Donkey Kong arcade game was. So big of a deal, in fact, that 30 million units in sales came directly from the arcade. And I'm not just talking about the arcade itself, no, it was on so many different consoles. It was on arcades, sure, but it was also on a Game & Watch, it was on Atari, it was on Famicom, NES, they put it on the GBA and the 3DS, every single console you can think of from like the early 80s all the way up to the 2000s had Donkey Kong on it. The Donkey Kong Country series was also very popular as well, and every other type of Donkey Kong game outside of the arcade sold 53 million units. Both are very respectable, and it makes me wonder why Nintendo has left Donkey Kong so dormant for so long. The Country series sold about 20 million units, and then the Jungle Beat series, the Donkey Kong Land series, all added up to that as well. I didn't even know the Donkey Kong Land series existed, but it adds about 7 million copies to this total. People love Donkey Kong, people love platformers, and most of all, Retro Studios has really done a good job of just bringing him into the modern era with 2D platforming. But we need a new 3D game. We need something a little bit more similar to the Mario movie. For people who don't like his rendition of that in that movie, I am sorry to say, but that is the future for Donkey Kong. The movie heavily featured Donkey Kong to try to grab some of that nostalgia, and I am sure that is a large part to why the movie had over $1 billion in grossing. I cannot wait to see what the future for Donkey Kong is and if they have something cooking, because believe me, they do not want to let this die. They need to reinnovate what Donkey Kong is, and it starts with the brand new Mario Kart and his brand new model. He looks a lot more like the movie version of Donkey Kong, but also don't forget he looks a lot like some of the OG renditions of him as well. That black around his eyes doesn't necessarily mean he's from the Mario movie, it just means that they're taking a new look at him. And in my opinion, that is the best thing they could possibly do. The Donkey Kong Country series is phenomenal, but it has not sold super well in a long time because it's just kind of repetitive. The future of Donkey Kong could be very bright if they make some games for it, but the clock is kind of ticking here. You can't let this fad just be a fad with Donkey Kong. You have to really capitalize on the success of this movie, on the success of him as a character, and on the Kongs in general. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some sort of new Donkey Kong game coming soon, and this video was recorded a couple of days before the Switch 2 presentation, so if I ended up being right on that, then hey, I will count it as a prediction, but I think Donkey Kong has to come soon. To no one's surprise, at number 4, we have the Legend of Zelda series, which has sold over 150 million units, a huge leap from what Donkey Kong was just at, and now we understand a little bit more why that number is so big, because of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom combining for 50 million in sales. 1/3 of the entire franchise comes from those two games alone. Every single 2D game, 3D game that is so beloved is just nothing in comparison to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom's numbers, and it paints a very clear picture as to what the future of Zelda is moving forward. I honestly do think this 3D method is the way to go, and the 2D games can also run alongside them. Something I'm learning from researching for this video is how incredible it is that these franchises have stood the test of time for so long. Looking at Donkey Kong, most of that came from the early days. Game & Watch was really just from the early days alone. All of these Brain Age games came from 20 years ago. For Zelda to have such sustained success from the 80s to now in 2025 is just incredible, and Nintendo has truly captivated that OG market, then the middle-aged market, and then the younger audience is getting in on it too. I wonder if the Switch 2 will continue this or if it will just go back to what it used to be, because Breath of the Wild sold incredibly well and still continues to sell to this day. Tears of the Kingdom had a massive launch and sort of slowed down. 20 million is still nothing to sneeze at, but I wonder if people were tired of that formula and what they'll do when it comes to the newer 3D games for the Switch 2, because Echoes of Wisdom sold 3.1 million units, and that's more of a traditional style of Zelda, and it just didn't sell even close to Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild. Honestly, I think most of this has to do with what platform it is on and if the Switch 2 succeeds and what consoles come after it. Obviously, the cream of the crop games will sell well regardless of the console, because the Wii U had a huge flop on its hands, but Splatoon still sold really well. Mario Kart 8 still sold really well. And a lot of those fans that bought Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom were brand new fans, including myself. Breath of the Wild was my very first Zelda game, and it got me into the entire series. I played so many of the older games because of that, and I still want to experience some of those. Similarly with Smash Ultimate and New Horizons for Animal Crossing, all of these franchises have been experienced by brand new gamers and people who want to continue playing these series moving forward. So the question is, was it just these games? Was it the Switch as a whole? Or did all of it together combined make a brand new audience become obsessed with Nintendo? Will this success continue to move forward? I guess only time will tell, and that's kind of the answer for every franchise, isn't it? But Zelda has sustained itself for this long, and I am very confident it will sustain itself for at least another decade and a half. And maybe in the next 15 years, we'll get ourselves at least one new 3D Zelda. That seems about right. They'll probably give us one. If we get two, we'll be spoiled. At number 3, we have what I would probably consider the final surprise of this list. It is just the Wii series, and it has sold over 217 million copies. Now, 82 million of that came from Wii Sports, and Wii Sports was just a pack-in game with the Wii. Sure, a lot of people also bought physical versions alongside of that, but these numbers are incredibly inflated by that one game. But I'm not trying to make excuses here, because every single one of these games sold incredibly well. We're talking Wii Sports Resort selling 33 million, Wii Play sold 28 million, Wii Fit 22 million, Wii Fit Plus 21 million. So many people shelled out the money, shelled out the cash just for these Wii games. And it's not even just a fad either. They kind of brought it back with Nintendo Switch Sports, and that game sold an unfathomable 13 million copies, something Brain Age could never hope to do, unfortunately. Even with all of the scrutiny around Switch Sports, with all of the avatar characters rather than Mii's, and just all of the charm being gone, and it being like literally a fourth of the games you could play on Wii Sports Resort, and also not having every single game at launch from the Wii Sports original game, was just insane. Nintendo knew they had something crazy back in the Wii. They knew it probably couldn't be replicated because nothing from those days can be replicated to the amount of success it was then, but they brought it back for Switch Sports and found success even still. This will probably become one of those franchises that just comes back once every generation. It might skip a couple here and there, but I'm pretty sure as long as Nintendo has little controllers that are motion controlled or just some sort of gameplay method similar to the Wii Sports, I am confident they will continue to put out games like this, and it will continue to blow my mind as to how well it sells. At number 2, we have ourselves the Pokemon series, sitting at over 300 million units of just the main games alone. There are a ton of spin-off games that I could also mention, and those add up to about 500 million, and sure, if you want to go ahead and include that, then we're somewhere around 800 to 900 million units, and then we could count mobile games such as Pokemon Go and all of these other things as well. So maybe I should put this at number 1, but it's actually incredibly similar. Even after you add up all those games, the numbers from 2 to 1 on this list, so we're just gonna go ahead and put this at number 2. Of course, the Pokemon series needs no introduction whatsoever. The initial games that came out back on the Game Boy Advance, Game Boy, 3DS, Switch, every single edition of Pokemon Red, Green, Blue, and Yellow all sold about 74 million units combined, and all the way up to the Switch generation, we have Scarlet and Violet selling 26 million, Arceus selling 15, Sword and Shield selling 26 million. The least amount of sales this series has seen is 16 million units from Pokemon X and Y down on the 3DS, and that is absurd to me. Pokemon has kind of created its own market in which it controls everything, because Pokemon is not just games, it's TV shows, it's anime, it's actual board games, it's culture, it's literally everything you could think of. There is a version of it in Pokemon, and everything helps to sell itself, right? Everything in the Pokemon stratosphere points you to buy other types of Pokemon merchandise. If you get a plushie, you're gonna wonder, oh my goodness, this thing is so cute, what game is it from? Then you're gonna wanna probably try to buy that game, which means you have to buy the console, which means you might buy the Pokemon edition of that console. Or if you play the games and then you see the anime, which actually keeps up with the storyline of the main games. It just goes back and forth. It's a huge cycle of Pokemon. Not to mention the trading cards and just everything. It is the highest grossing franchise in the entire world in terms of all of its media combined. Higher than anything Disney owns, for heaven's sake. Pokemon is just a ridiculous selling franchise, and no one can dispute that it is the highest in the world, regardless of quality problems with the latest games and some of the current products and merchandise. I'm pretty confident that they could just totally make all of these games from like 2 developers and it just be horrible and no one loves it, and it still sells about 15 to 20 million units per game. Anyone can just continue to make Pokemon games with no experience, or just get literally anyone off the street to make a Pokemon game, and people will buy it just because it has Pokemon on it. It has resonated with people from old to young, all of the people growing up with Nintendo, all the people with smartphones. Everyone knows what Pokemon is, and unlike all of Nintendo's franchises that really kind of went dormant during the Wii U era, when Nintendo was really flopping with brand recognition, Pokemon went stronger than ever with Pokemon Go. It reached new heights. Pokemon survived and thrived in Nintendo's worst era, which proves it doesn't even really need Nintendo to succeed. It just needs to exist, and that's it. I really hope that the Switch 2 brings forth better quality games, and I was just watching a YouTuber the other day. I will put him on the screen right now. He is a game developer, and he has helped me understand a lot about the intricacies of game developing, and it turns out that the Pokemon games look so bad because the team is really young, and a lot of these assets that they use are a lot nicer and better than some of other Nintendo games, but they just don't know how to use it very well, and it takes up a lot of what is called the development budget. The development budget isn't actual money, it is just how much of the graphical fidelity is being used by the limited amounts of power the console has. So if they make a crazy texture for a certain mountain, they have to make sure that that doesn't exceed a certain amount of number that goes through that budget. So really, they just need more experience, they need more time. They are working on Legends ZA right now, and it looks a lot better than Scarlet and Violet did. They've learned a lot from their mistakes and are starting to mesh a lot better, but it still, in my opinion, is inexcusable how bad these games look compared to other first-party games, especially considering, like I said, and like I continue to say in every video ever it feels, Pokemon is the highest grossing franchise. There is no excuse for why these games can't be better. And like this YouTuber I mentioned before said, it is not about raw power or raw fidelity, it is about artist expression. And that is so important in the modern gaming landscape. So I hope moving forward they do better and the Switch 2 brings forth the best Pokemon games yet. And of course, at number 1, we have ourselves the Super Mario franchise. Over 900 games have been sold in the series, in the spin-offs. Everything Mario related sold over 900 million. If we include other types of media and merchandise and just everything, it's well over 1.4 billion, but of course Pokemon would probably take that over as well, so we're not going to count all of that. We're just going to try to stick as much as possible to games. And boy, are there a lot of games I could talk about, starting off with the NES version of Super Mario Bros. 65 million copies of that game sold across all these different consoles it was re-released on. 65 million. Super Mario Bros. 2, 37 million. Super Mario Bros. 3, 40 million. We had 34 million Super Mario World. All kinds of crazy numbers throughout this series. The 3D entries even just got better than that, all up to Super Mario Odyssey with 29 million. And of course, all of the spin-off series, the Mario puzzle games like Mario vs. Donkey Kong sold 13 million. The Mario sports games have all sold over 63 million. Mario Kart, 180 million. Mario RPGs, 36 million. Mario Party, 84 million. And of course, Luigi's Mansion, 25 million. This franchise could not help itself. Every single thing it touches turns to gold. And of course, there was a little bit of a drought during the Wii U and 3DS area with the New Soup series, and the 3D Marios were a little bit bland for some people's liking with 3D Land, and of course 3D World, which I loved, but had a lot of problems. Everything was seeming to decline at the time, but then with the Nintendo Switch, it all came right back up. Mario will forever be one of the highest selling game franchises of all time and will continue to influence culture and media forever. There is no other franchise simply like Mario, and Sony and Microsoft can only hope to get half, even a fraction of this success. Nintendo really just needs to keep being creative with Mario, needs to keep pushing boundaries with Mario, and just playing it safe with a lot of these sports and kart games that people love. Luigi's Mansion was such a cool rendition of a Mario character and changing up the genre entirely. Maybe they could do more of that with like the Princess Peach game. They tried to do that. Maybe they could make more Wario games or a Waluigi game or just other types of games, maybe a Pauline or a Rosalina game. You can't tell me it wouldn't be so cool playing as Rosalina and doing some big cosmic battle, or as Pauline and you're just like trying to get this city in order. It's almost like Animal Crossing, but with Pauline in control of New Donk City. This franchise has quite literally no limits. It has no ceiling. It can keep going higher and higher, and with the new Super Mario Bros. Movie, I cannot wait to see what the future holds for the cinema aspect of Nintendo at large, and obviously for the Mario Bros. 2 movie. We know Zelda is going to get its own movie in a couple years time, but what else will happen? What else will the company Nintendo Pictures make? We've been waiting to see what they're doing, and maybe it's just a lot of these animations that we've seen from the Nintendo Today app. Maybe that's what they've been working on, but I think they've been working on something more. I can't wait to see where Mario heads on the Switch 2 and just in the future in general. It is so unbelievably bright. And the 3D Mario series, it has been such a long time since we got a new game. When you're watching this, you will most likely know what that next game is, but as I said, I am recording it before the Switch 2 Direct, so I don't know yet, and I just am so excited to finally see a new 3D Mario game, because Bowser's Fury, I guess, could count, but Mario Odyssey really was the last brand new game. They just need to keep the course, keep doing well, keep Mario as a fun, lovable, great to control character, and they will continue to see this success. So that was the top 10 Nintendo franchises in terms of sales numbers. I honestly was shocked by so many of these, so please let me know down in the comments if you were or if you had expected other franchises to be on here as well. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for doing that, and like this video because I'm sure you had to have enjoyed it, right? If you made it all the way to the end, consider subscribing to join my channel for videos just like this one. Click the notification bell to know when those videos drop, and consider joining my membership program to get early access to all videos just like this one. And you can get fun little badges next to your name when you comment, and Discord servers. Make sure you click on the left video to watch the top 10 best-selling Nintendo Switch games. It's a very similar concept I took from this video, so I'm sure you'll like it if you like this one, and click on the right video to see my ranking of every single track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. It was a big project, and not a lot of people saw it, so I would love for you to check it out. You make sure you have a phenomenal day. My name is Ray. This has been Ray's Nintendo Talk, and I will see you all in the next video.